I'd like to welcome everyone to Software Spotlight, your front row seat to the latest innovations in software for small business. I'm Michael Burnswald, your host. Each week, we're joined by executives at leading companies to get an insider's perspective on the emerging technologies, business strategies, and market trends shaping the future. Tune in to stay ahead of the curve on leveraging software to boost productivity and growth in your business. Be sure to visit our website, softwareoasis.com, to access our free weekly newsletter, and be sure to sign up for our upcoming 2024 software webinar series. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Laffin. She's a seasoned marketing strategist and content creator, specializing in helping startups and founders navigate the complex world of marketing. With extensive experience across industries, Anne brings a wealth of knowledge to her role as founder of Fin Marketing Management. She is passionate about crafting compelling narratives and driving growth through innovative marketing strategies. So with that, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, very happy to have you with us this morning. And I know a lot of founders and executives and others are listening to the show and saying to themselves, hey, I've got my marketing covered, or I know I have an issue and I know I need to reach out to somebody, and how do I do that? So I was hoping maybe you could give us a little bit of background on yourself and in marketing.
Sure. So I have been in marketing for over 20 years at this point, which snuck up on me for sure. I started in market research, and then I went over to financial services for a bit. I went back to market research. And so at all of these different experiences, I had various company sizes, various types of personalities that I worked with, and kind of various roles. But it gave me this beautiful foundation for wearing a lot of hats, which was great because in my last job before I started my own business, I went and worked for a financial services startup. And that is a place where you're going to wear a ton of hats. I was employee number 6.
Sure.
So, that's where you really learn how to make a lot out of a little. And I learned while I was there that I really loved the startup environment, super fast paced, kind of messy, not a lot of framework in place, if any at all. And I just loved it. And so when the opportunity came about during the middle of the pandemic to start my own business, I took the chance. I took the leap, and here we are.
Very nice.
Yeah. And so Fin Marketing works solely with early stage companies. And I work on messaging, strategy, and then execution of the plan that we pull together.
Yeah, that was a big question I had. So at a high level, so you'll help an organization figure out, what's working, what's not working with what they're doing now, and then plan a strategy or a roadmap as to where they should head. But not only the strategy, you actually help with the execution as well.
All the above right now. Yeah. And part of the reason for that is that, again, most of these companies either don't have a marketing department at all, or they have a
Sure.
very small marketing department. So they need an extra set of hands to come in and lay that foundational work and then roll up their sleeves and get to work. And I appreciate that, right? I've been there. I have done that. I have been that person doing that work and know how valuable it is to have an additional resource at your disposal. So
Sure. And obviously with marketing, with any type of marketing mix, you have a lot of levers you can pull, and I'm sure that it's very different from one, project to the next. But can you talk a little bit, maybe give an example of an organization you've worked with and some of those different levers that you've pulled to make things work within their marketing mix?
for sure. The first one that I pull on inevitably is email. And I feel like it has such a nasty connotation with people. I hear all the time, email is dead, blah, blah, email is not dead, right? Email is still a fantastic channel. The ROI on email is insane, right? It's a very
Sure.
cost-effective way to get in front of a list that you control. And so I have seen outstanding success with well-crafted email campaigns at almost all of the startups that I've worked with. And I've used email in a lot of different ways. That's part of why I like it, is that it's very versatile. But right now, one of the things I'm thinking of is actually for getting demos, but doing that through content. So I was at a company where we did a ton of webinars. And one of our primary methods for promoting webinars was through email. And we had thousands of signups for some of these webinars, which we were a small company. So again, like,
Sure.
we don't have a massive list, but we saw really amazing success through email promotion, through webinar, right? So you're basically email, content, good offer, value, and then we converted a ton of those people from the webinar into business. So, and that doesn't always have to be a webinar on the other end of that email for it to be a great channel. I've seen a lot of success too with just carefully crafted messaging or a carefully crafted offer, something around Cyber Monday or a holiday, right? You can do email is very versatile. And so, yeah, I've seen a lot of success there.
Sure. So on the front end of that, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of driving, you know, prospects to sign up for the webinar on that email list,
Mm-hmm.
what types of strategies did you use to effectively drive signups?
So I think the main thing to keep in mind whenever you're wanting someone to perform an action is, what value are we actually providing? How does this solve a problem for the person I'm sending this communication to? When those two things are aligned, the conversion for me has been fantastic. It's when you
Sure.
have a little bit of a shot in the dark on the messaging with your audience, you see that disconnect, right? The conversion may not be there. You're not always going to hit it out of the park, but obviously the goal is to hit it out of the park most of the time. So, for instance, in this webinar series that I'm talking about with email, we did social, we promoted on the website, right? It was kind of
Sure.
I hate this word, but holistic effort, right? We
Yeah.
had met with a true campaign to drive those signups. And, we had a solid list. So I knew that if I got the messaging right, it was going to be a win, and it was.
Very nice. Well, it's interesting because my teenage daughter is going through her principles of marketing class now, and since my college days, it seems like they've added a few additional things to the marketing mix,
I'm
because
sure.
she turned to me and she's like, "No, Dad, there's definitely more than five marketing principles."
Yeah. Product pricing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so funny, but it is so interesting, the different ways in which companies can promote events or
Yeah.
different offers and things like that.
Mhm.
Email marketing is clearly, as you said, one of the channels that an organization does own, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that is so important, because a lot of traditional paid media is driven by the markets. And obviously, having had the finance background, the markets are demanding ever increasing profits and bottom
Mhm.
line revenue. And so a lot of times, something that may be working in one channel today may not work tomorrow. And as you said, with your email list and your email campaigns, that's something that you own and you
Yep.
have ongoing. And it's something that obviously can build over years. Are
Yep.
there different strategies that you like to suggest for your clients in terms of, building their email list, that seem to, do you have like a top list of strategies for suggestions to build a list?
I do. I mean, some are fairly basic, where it's things like making sure you either have, you've got some kind of content on your website that can be downloadable, right? You could also have like an exit box that pops up, which I know this sounds a little annoying, but if someone is spending some time on your website, they haven't filled out a form, you could have something that pops up to be like, don't leave yet. We'd love to stay in touch. So there are some things that you can do on your website. That's a great place to start and collect names. Um, Having any kind of offer at all, right? If you have some type of downloadable content, and I know there's a lot of back and forth about whether content should be gated anymore, but
Sure.
you can promote content through social. So there's another channel. Now you're driving people back from social media to potentially fill out a form on your website. So that can be a way to build your list.
Sure. So
Web,
form a lead magnet of some sort. Sure.
correct. Webinars are actually another way, again, to build your list. So obviously, if you have a list, you're going to promote to that list. But again, you can use social, you can use your website. And if you have a speaker on for your webinar, now you have a partner that can also potentially help promote your event or your webinar.
Oh, fantastic. Sure.
So partner, like making friends in the sandbox, is also a great way just to build your list in general. And events in general can also be a really good way to build a list. So whether it's a webinar, something that's in person, you can do something small. That can add more names, right? If you have a small list of clients that you love, you can have them bring a friend with them to whatever event that you host. So
Sure.
I'd spent quite a bit of time pulling together list building strategies, and they run the gamut from super easy and something that you might be doing anyway to things that take a lot of time and potentially money to pull together. But there's options is kind of where I'm going with this. I think people get stuck of like, well, I just need a lead magnet or a form on my website. It is one option, but there's so many others. The other thing to keep in mind is just patience. I think we already kind of touched on this today, but it's you won't necessarily build your list up overnight, but that's, having a few strategies deployed to help build a list is important.
Sure. And I guess at a high level, with any type of marketing, it's a long game.
Yeah.
And really, there are many, as we mentioned before, many levers to pull, and everything needs to work towards that common, goal. And I think part of the planning process you were talking about earlier is, outlining what is our goal, what are the strategies that we're going to use to get there, and all of that. So
right.
at a different, taking a slightly different track, when you're working with a new client, how do they come to you? Is it mostly referrals, or do you have your own marketing, channels that are profitable for you to bring in new clients?
So I'm still, I would say about 80% of my new business comes in through referrals, which is great.
Sure.
But I do a lot of podcasting. I have done some of my own webinars, and also have some networks that I am involved in, which is another great way to build a list. And
Sure.
that's how I've kind of pulled on different resources to help bring in a business. So, my marketing might look like social, email, partnerships, and podcasting. And I might, like, for a solopreneur, that's actually quite a bit to be doing all at once,
Yeah,
right?
it's a lot,
And
to
it's a
manage.
lot.
So
And yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I think it's funny. They say the cobbler's son is the last one to get a new pair of shoes, and obviously, it sounds like you're doing your own marketing as well,
Yeah.
which is so
Yep.
important.
Yeah.
And companies, as they come aboard, are there different common themes that you see with these new startups and all that are important to recognize?
For sure. Because I work with very early stage startups, there's a few themes that I see over and over again. One, the messaging is frequently inconsistent. And this is really due to the fact that there hasn't been somebody in-house yet, or a big team of marketers in-house, to make sure that the brand is consistent, the message is consistent across all the channels, that the sales team is saying the same thing as the website, as the flyers. So
Sure.
message consistency is usually an issue. And then the other would just be consistent efforts. So, maybe they sent out an email last month, and maybe they did a blog post 2 months ago, or, that kind of thing. So there's no real plan around how are we going to meet our goal. It's kind of just been survival mode. So those are probably the two biggest themes that I see over and over again.
Sure.
It's just really a lack of consistency.
Yeah, and a lot of founders obviously are being pulled in so many different directions, and
Yes,
probably at the point that they reach out to you, it's either out of desperation or excitement to be able to
yes,
hand off the marketing role to
for
someone
sure.
that's been there and done that and understands how to get it done.
Yep.
And it's probably very gratifying, I would think, seeing clients, along that continuum of having just started all the way through to a level of success, where you're helping these organizations grow.
Yeah.
So,
I have a client now in the animal health space, and they got started in the middle of the pandemic, and they had a plan where they were going to sell an in-clinic tool for veterinarians. And what happened was no one could get in to see their veterinarian because of COVID.
sure.
So that suddenly was this like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So we thought we had our audience, we thought we had our product, our message, and we had to do a complete pivot into, okay, if we can't get into the clinics, what can we actually provide? They ended up creating a whole separate line of products that could be done at home. And we ended up having to look at the messaging, test the messaging for months, which I mean is not probably that long in the startup world, but it felt like eternity to figure out, do
Yeah.
we go after the pet parent? Do we go after the veterinarian? So we had to do a lot of experimenting with what need are we actually fulfilling here? And now we have figured out how both products can play together nicely, and they actually complement each other. We have figured out what audience we need to get to. We have dialed in the messaging, the marketing. We're figuring out most of the channels where we need to be. And so it is very gratifying to go from this, we think we have a product and realize we don't have a product that can work right now, to this, a full suite and a plan and a direction. That feels amazing, really does.
So let me ask you, obviously, statistics, measurement, data is so important in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have, when you have a client that doesn't either have a lot of data or needs to figure out how to measure correctly, do you have some favorite tools or strategies for, collecting data to be able to, help them make informed or good decisions,
Yeah.
especially in situations where they may not have a lot of volume that may be statistically relevant,
Yeah. I mean, for me, I deal with primarily organic channels. I myself
Sure.
don't like, if we have to do paid efforts, I usually will resource those out. But so when I am looking at organic measures, I'm looking at things like web traffic. I'm looking at social media, visitors, impressions, is the list, or is the amount of followers growing there? And then on email, I'm looking at things like open rates, click rates, is the unsubscribe small,
Sure.
and is the list growing over time? And then I'm looking, once I get some baseline data across maybe those three things, it's, are the numbers going up? And I know this sounds really basic, but I'll give you an example for email here.
Yeah.
I use a benchmark of about 20% as a solid email open rate. If you have a customer list, I would push that far closer to probably 50%. If you've got a super cold list, it's probably closer to 12 or 15%, somewhere down there. But
Sure.
20 is the number I like to start as like my benchmark. We need to be here. Once I hit that 20, then I'm trying to figure out how to push us up well above 20. And so that is the goal I strive for with my clients, and have done very well achieving that goal. And I accomplish that through looking at subject lines, looking at a clean list in our database, what's the deliverability like? And just, again, making sure that the content that we are creating is providing value. And I think that could be applied across all of it, whether you're talking about social, whether you're talking about website, whether you're talking about content that you're creating. Are people reading it? Are people looking at it? Are people continuously coming back to your site? So those are the things I would look at. And I think, to me, those are the almost all website. I can't think of a website platform that doesn't have some level of analytics on it. And if you could always
Sure.
add Google Analytics to it, if for
And
some reason
sometimes
the
it can be
analytics are terrible.
overwhelming, for a
Oh
lot
my
of,
God,
yeah, for a
100%.
lot of
Yeah.
times. Sometimes it's information overload, but and obviously frequency of messaging, especially with email, is so important.
Yes.
Well, I've spoken with many a business owner that says, yeah, I have an email list, but I haven't sent anything to them in months, and clearly if someone signed up for your email list, um, there was an initial reason that they signed up, and to,
Right.
deliver, consistently, whether it's weekly, daily,
Sure.
biweekly, whatever it is,
Yep.
keeps your list engaged, and
Yeah.
it goes to that open rate that you were talking about.
Yep.
And yeah, and I think really a lot of times, picking the right platform is so important. Do you work across platforms, or do you have some favorites? Or I'm sure you've seen every email platform and then some, good, bad,
I,
and ugly.
I have seen a lot of them. And I think what's crazy is that despite having, I could give you a list of probably 6 or 7 that I have worked with, there's still so many others now that are brand new and that I haven't had the
Sure,
chance yet to work with. HubSpot, I know it's kind of funny that I'm mentioning HubSpot as something that a tool that startups work with, although they seem to have a nice actual startup package now that early
sure,
businesses can get involved in. HubSpot's great. The analytics are great. I mean, the capabilities are great. There's good automation capabilities there. But if I were new and couldn't get into HubSpot yet, MailChimp, Constant Contact are two kind of like old school, lots of functionality for not a ton of money. Most of these you can
sure.
get into for free, or they have a free trial. Obviously, as your list grows and you need more functionality, there are paid options. They all have paid. That's how they make money. But those are two really easy ones to get into off the bat. There's Get Response,
Yeah, there are so
Claudio.
many different
There's
options. Yeah,
so many, and I
yeah.
think that's actually that can also be overwhelming. But maybe it's
Just
comforting to know
picking
that
picking a solution and
yes,
getting whatever your lead magnet is, and I guess at a high level, if you think about it, you were talking about webinars; those are potentially a lead magnet. It's
a
really,
hun-
and yeah, it's an exchange of information for someone's contact information.
we also with a lot of my clients and in a lot of the industries I work in, either if it's financial advisors or veterinarians or whomever, they need to get continuing education credits.
Sure,
And so if you have a webinar that was available for CE, that recording can potentially sit on your website. People can watch that webinar again. Usually they can answer a couple questions and still qualify for CE. So there are ways you can use that content for various ways, right? It can kind of continue to live on for months after it was created and provide more value and more leads for you. So, I think whenever you create some piece of content, finding ways that you can multi-purpose it should also be kept in mind.
and I know one question that's come up from our podcast listeners, and I'll ask you since we're on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, companies will put all this effort into promoting an event, getting people to sign up for an event, and then not everybody shows up for the event. Are there
Yep.
some strategies that you might suggest to companies to increase the show up rate for their webinars?
For sure. So, I mean, listen, we're all busy and we get distracted. So having some reminders, and a lot of webinar software will do this for you on your behalf. They will send out reminder emails. So one would definitely have, if your software doesn't do that, at least build in 1 or 2 reminders, including a day of reminder to be like, we're so excited to see you at 12 today for XYZ event, right?
Sure.
So do some of that. You can also cross promote again still on social. So if for some reason people are not reading your emails or not getting your emails, maybe they'll see it on social as well. You also want to make the content that you're providing on the webinar engaging. So on the chance that these people are a repeat webinar sign up, if they've sat with you before and know that you maybe have some interactive content, that what you're sharing is not just a sales pitch, they may
Sure.
be more likely to show up the next time. So
Okay.
part of it's promotional and part of it also has to do with the content. And I think
Yeah.
the other thing is, I'm guilty of this myself. A lot of people like to watch the recording after the fact. I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. So also make sure after the fact that you are at least sending out a recording so that people can still get access to your content if they wanted it and if they want it, because they might follow back around with you if they have questions at that point. So even though they weren't there live, they can still get value from what you presented. So
Makes a lot of sense. And with our webinars that we host, they're weekly, so we have that sense of consistency. But
mhm.
we also are very, very focused on making sure that our webinars are educational,
Yeah,
and they're not sales pitches, because I think
great.
we've all been there, and it's not a great feeling to take an hour out of your day and be sitting through a sales pitch for an hour.
It's not good. No.
Yeah. So, can you give our listeners an idea of the main buckets of, I guess, services that you offer at Fin Marketing, so they can get an idea as to the different, types of offerings that you have to help out their organization?
For sure. So I have a standalone offer that's just messaging and strategy. And that includes kind of an overhaul of your messaging top to bottom across channels, making sure that everything is cleaned up. You have a solid value proposition and mission statement. Um, and then I pull together a marketing plan so that if you want to implement on your own, you can. But if not, then I also have either advisory services where I can help out a team that you have in place. I can also kind of act as a fractional head of marketing. So for me, that messaging and strategy is kind of the first bucket. And then we can fall into two tiers, advisory or fractional head of marketing. And then I also write and create a lot of content. This is just something I like to do, something I've done a lot for clients. So I have broken off a separate content package too, in case people just need social content in terms of flyers or one-offs or things like that. So that is primarily what I do for my clients.
Great. And then at a level, that a lot of the customers or clients could understand, what do you see as like the biggest challenges for startups today? Is there like a core challenge that you see as a big boulder?
So I'm going to unfortunately split this into two. One is still fundraising. I think that's always
Sure.
been an issue, but the last year and a half seems to have been particularly challenging for the startup community and for getting funding. So that's always running in the back, I think, of founders' minds. And I feel for them, which means the next challenge of, are we in the right channels to promote to our audience? That's the next biggest problem, right? Are we making the most of the time that we have, the dollars we have, the resources we have with our marketing? And so being willing to test out a plan, let it run for a bit, and then realize this isn't working or this is crushing it, let's do more of it, is really key. So that's a challenge, right? It's you have to be willing to
Sure.
experiment and kind of realize we don't necessarily have any data. We've got to try something else. So
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And is there like a core bucket of marketing strategies you recommend for startups as they're pulling their plan together?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over again, but messaging is first. For me, and the reason why I say this is that if your messaging is sloppy and doesn't resonate with your audience, like you've already lost them. So it doesn't matter what channel you're in, what strategy you deploy. If your messaging is confusing and doesn't resonate with your audience, you're dead in the water. So that's got to be first. Then it's a matter of you look at your resources. Do we have money and resource for paid opportunities? If the answer is yes, then we can find an appropriate amount of spend to place there. More often than not, the answer is no. Again, with the companies that I work with. And so it's finding the right mix of organic. I love pulling on content because the founders I work with, they're all subject matter experts. They all have a thing they made, a thing they're passionate about, something they went to school for a million years, whatever it is. So they
Sure.
have knowledge that we can turn into content machine. Okay, so that's one. I love email because again, it's a channel you own, it's a channel you can build, it's a channel you can control, and it's so versatile. And then social is the other piece and social with the founder too. So company social is important, but the founder sharing his or her story through social is the other piece of this that can be really magical. Whether they're building and sharing, through social, whether they're just, out promoting whatever it is they're doing. I think that's another piece of the pie. That's a beautiful strategy to put in place.
And very personal,
Very
obviously.
personal. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation, one thread I want to pull on. You had mentioned on partnerships as a
Mm.
good strategy for
Hmm.
organizations,
Yep.
without cost to move forward. Can you give some examples of some, solid partnerships and some ideas that people might consider implementing?
Sure. So, with a current client I have now, they're not a competitor, right? They are a complementer, I will say, right? We're in the same
Sure,
space, we have similar audiences. And so we wanted to do some cross promotion through our email lists. And so we each offered a percentage off on each other's products to our
sure.
respective lists. So now my list has essentially doubled in size. Okay. So that's
That's
an easy
powerful.
one where, yeah, very powerful, right? I mean, you're sharing and it's powerful for both parties. So it's huge. Um, there's other ways, and in the past I've done this where if there are, again, businesses that have, let's say, um, like partner pages where you can now be a preferred vendor on their list. And maybe if they now again, there's a lot of variables in here, but what I'm thinking of is
Sure,
these particular companies had like monthly partner emails that went out highlighting all their new partners that they work with. They would always do a webinar with their new partners highlighting what was cool and interesting about the partnership. You know, again, they're on a preferred vendor page. There's usually no cost associated with that type of partnership. It's just a matter
sure.
of like, what is, there's something involved with that partnership. There could be a percentage off that you have to guarantee the people that come in through that platform. But
Right?
again, you're providing so much exposure to your business by being up on their platform. So looking for opportunities like that where you can kind of complement your business with someone that's similar in your industry is huge. Or finding another potential business that wants to have a preferred vendor they can share is a big one.
So if you market peanut butter and you can find a jelly company to work with, you're good to go.
When, yep.
I love it. I love it.
Maybe
Well, that's
fluff,
so helpful. Yeah, one or the other, or a good
Yep.
soft bread that makes it all work.
Hmm.
But
Yep.
and what do you see as like high level trends within marketing at this point in time? Are you seeing any higher level shifts or big paradigm shifts?
Yeah. I mean, video to me is still reigning supreme. And that's video could be, in my mind, through the form of podcast, right? Could be
Right?
through the form of the founder taking a quick 30-second snippet in his or her car, talking about something cool that's happening that day at work. Um, it could be a recorded webinar. Either way, video to me is still the way people are consuming information. So that still seems to be a trend. Um, Also, with my clients, we're still trying to figure out this push for influencer marketing and how that can make an impact on brands. Um, I think there's something there. I think it has to be done well, and that's kind of the sneaky part of influencer marketing. You know, there's a lot of people that want to promote products, but you need the right fit. You know,
Well,
you
as
need.
long as it's yeah, as long as it's not the influencer that convinced both my teenage daughters to buy Stanley cups.
Oh, I know. Them
Oh, it's
and every
crazy.
other teenager in the world. Yeah, I know it is crazy. But it's powerful. But that's a great example. You know, like
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
works, but you have to find the right partnership with the right reach, I think, for it to truly be successful. But I don't think that's going anywhere yet. So I think that's another trend.
Sure. Well, we'll leave a link in the show notes for anybody that would like to connect with you over at Fin Marketing.
Beautiful.
And I think it's clearly within your wheelhouse to help a lot of different organizations push their marketing efforts forward and gain some traction in what they're doing. So I
Awesome.
really appreciate your taking the time out to join us on the Software Spotlight this week.
Thank you for having me so much. It was fun.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Coming up next week, we have Jason Bernard. He's the brand SERP guy, and he joins the podcast to share his experience in digital brand management and controlling your brand narrative in search results. He's actually joining us from France, and he's the
Mm.
founder of CaliCube. Jason has over 20 years of experience helping companies optimize their online presence, and we'll dive into his insights on leveraging Google's knowledge graph to build brand authority in search. So be sure to visit our website, softwareoasis.com, to access our free weekly software newsletter, and be sure to sign up for our upcoming weekly webinar series.